Alright, so let's say we start with the number 7, and normally we would hop so many spaces to the right, okay? But imagine that we don't hop any spaces. Imagine we just add 0. So if we add 0 to 7, what number do you think we're going to end up with? Well, it's kind of like just staying where you're at, right? This lesson is very simple, and if you don't hop any, if you don't move any, that's like adding 0, right? And you stay at exactly the same number. Now this is important just because a lot of times when you add 0 to a variable, well, you will do that a lot, and you want that concept to click. You want to be comfortable with it so that you don't make any mistakes. The same goes for negative numbers. If we start with -3 and we don't go anywhere, in other words, we add 0 or add nothing, we stay at what? -3. In other words, we don't hop to the right or to the left. We stay right at that number. Now let's look at pi. The same is actually true for pi. If we add nothing to it, if we move nowhere to the right or left and we just stay there, what number is that? Well, it's the same number you started out with, pi, correct? So one more quick real life example. If you have $10 and nobody gives you any more money, how much money are you going to have? Well, if nobody gives you anything, you have $10. Now, if they give you $5, you do 10 plus 5, right? If they give you $20, you do 10 plus 20, which is 30. If no one gives you any money whatsoever, you're going to still have $10. So maybe that'll help you with the concept. But it's a very simple concept. What is this called? This is called the identity property of addition. Now, why is it called identity? Identity, and why addition? Because basically what this property means is what number do you have to add to a number to stay at the same number? And if you're staying with the same number, you're identifying with the same number, right? So you start with A and you end with A. What number do you have to add? That answer is 0. Okay. So the first question is 8 plus what number gives you 8 back? Again, this is a very simple lesson. And hopefully you paid attention before, but if you don't move anywhere on the number line, that's like adding 0, correct? Now if we added 1, we'd have to hop 1 to the right. If we subtracted 1, we'd hop 1 to the left. Adding 0 means you're staying at exactly the same place, which means you end up at the same number. Very simple concept. Example number 2, -43, let's go ahead and read this together. -43 plus 0 is equal to what number? So if I add 0 to -43, what do you think we'll end up with? Well, it's real simple, right? So if I'm adding 0, just like it's very similar to the last example, I'm going to end up with the same number, right? I'm not moving to the left or right. Should end up with the same number, and that's going to be -43. Does it work with decimals? Well, let's take a look. We have what number, let's go ahead and read this together. What number plus 0 is equal to 2.718? Now there's a number you're going to see later on down the line, but for right now, we can actually go ahead and see that if I'm adding 0 to some number and end up with 2.718, it's got to be that number, right? Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. In other words, I'm starting with some unknown number, I'm adding 0 to it, and which means I'm staying at the same place on the number line, so that's got to be the same number, right? Let's take a look and see. 2.718. Okay. A number plus 0, let's go ahead and read this together. Remember, if A confuses you, just think of it as a number, any number, okay? Or a number. Any number plus 0 gives you what number back? Now again, if variables confuse you, just pick a number. Pick 3, for example. Just imagine that this is 3. Well, if you started with 3, you'd end up with what? 3, right? So if you start with A, you end up with what? Pretty simple, right? The answer is A. Okay, we can go back through and fill these. Example 4 was A. Example 3 we figured out was 2.718. Example 2 we figured out was -43. And I should do that more often. I should go back and look at the original question. And 8 plus what is equal to 8? And the answer is 0. Let's look at the next example. What number plus x, let's go ahead and read this together. What number plus 0 is equal to x? And again, we can actually go ahead and see what that's going to be. You're going to see this more than anything when you're solving equations. If you start with a number and add 0 and end up with x, then your original one must be x. So x plus 0 is equal to x, just like a plus 0 is equal to a. Same concept. Remember, x and a are just variables. They could be any number. I know it's a letter and sometimes you get confused. It's just there to represent a number. That's all it is. So n plus what is equal to n? Well, if I start with n and I end up with n, I can't add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, or negative 7, can I? We can only add one thing to end up with the same number, and that answer is 0. I want to do a couple more, just because you can actually add 0 to more than one number. So here we have x plus y plus 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you the answer. You might already realize that kind of what we started with must be what we end up with. But if I add 0 to x plus y, I'm going to stay with x plus y. This one's a little bit harder to understand. We're going to use a concept we've already learned. We know that in math we can add any order we like, okay? And you might want to think about what that property was, but for now, we just go ahead and add the second and third together. We know that y plus 0 is y, and now that we have x plus y, that must be what goes inside the box. So we used a previous concept. Now, what was that concept? Why does it not matter what order you add the numbers? That's called the associative property of addition, just in case you forgot. One more. If I start with n plus n, okay, so m plus n, what number would I have to add to stay at m plus n? And by now, hopefully, you've got a real good grasp on this. There's going to be one thing you could add to stay at m plus n, and that is 0. So again, this is called the associative property of this is called the identity property of addition, meaning if you take any number or any group of numbers and add 0 to it, you will stay with that same number or group of numbers.